A recording. So again, good morning to everyone. Thank you for joining us on an early Tuesday morning. My name is Monique Colclough. I'm the Director of Programs and Initiatives here at the Belk Center for Community College Leadership and Research. We're out of the College of Education at NC State, and I'm joined this morning by some amazing folks that I've had the pleasure of working with throughout the last 5 academic semesters. It's been a while and time is moving fast. But before I introduce them, I want to remind you all of our topic for this morning. We're going to be talking about successful planning and execution of faculty learning communities or professional learning communities. The FLC and PLC are sometimes interchangeable, and I'll give a little bit of background about some of the context for that. But the folks joining me this morning are going to talk about their communities at their colleges, at their hubs, their goals, how they got started, their outcomes, and some of the evidence-based practices that they are pulling together for all of the folks who are in North Carolina across the Great 58 to have a better, clearer understanding of who our students are, as well as our content material, and to be able to provide peer-to-peer interaction so that we are all continuing to grow to positively impact our student success rates, which is something that we are all quite familiar with from a metric standpoint, both through the system office's dashboards, but then also through individual college strategic plans, goals, and metrics and rallying points, things of that nature. So you are welcome at any point in this discussion to pull yourself off mute if you have a question. We want it to be engaging and not that we're talking at you. You're also welcome, if you feel more comfortable, to stay on mute and stay kind of behind the screen and jot in the chat. There's no wrong or right way to be involved in this conversation this morning. And I thank you all for joining us again. I will introduce collectively the amazing folks that are joining me this morning. They represent 4 different community colleges here in the system. And from the West Teaching and Learning Hub, we have the co-directors Natasha Harris and Elizabeth Braun, who are representing Wilkes Community College and Catawba Valley Community College. From the East Teaching and Learning Hub, we have the two co-directors, Kelly Sorenson and Rebecca Lanier, representing Lenoir Community College and Carteret Community College. And so I want to give them each an opportunity to jump in on our very first question. So I hope everybody is ready. If you have questions in the chat, you're welcome to drop those at any point in time for those folks who are just joining. Before I begin our questions, I did want to give a little bit of background about the FLC and PLC terminology. And throughout, I hope to, throughout this chat, drop the link to the actual articles that I'm referencing. And if I can't, I'll make sure that I share it when I share out the recording. But there is an article, Tinnell, Ralston, Tretter, and Mills. The title is Sustaining Pedagogical Change via Faculty Learning Communities. And there's a second article that's really important for this work that I think is a great foundation, a great grounding opportunity. And that second article is by Schmitz, Ebersole, and Morrill, and Parker. And it is entitled Measuring the Effectiveness of Community College Faculty Learning Communities on Student Performance. And I share these because I thought it was important. Sometimes we have a lot of literature that's really based and rooted in university life. And so the context, the ability, the resources are a little bit different because they sometimes are rooted in the tenure process or rooted in a very specific context that's related to university life. And since all of our community colleges operate a little bit differently, but don't have the tenure experience that we are working towards, I thought it was important to identify 2 articles that are really rooted in the community college experience and community college faculty. And in particular, in the Sustaining Pedagogical Change via Faculty Learning Community article, I want to read a little snippet to kind of give some context for FLCs, faculty learning communities, and PLCs. And so on the very first page of the article, it talks about professional learning communities, PLCs being a common practice in the K-12 community. So if you're curious about where this foundation stems, it stems from our colleagues in K-12 as a way to encourage, to provide resources, to provide sharing mechanisms to K-12 teachers, instructors, faculty, so that they are testing and developing new pedagogies to meet their student needs. And we know that's really rooted in standardized testing. But more importantly, recently, higher ed practitioners have really taken that and adopted the faculty or the professional learning communities to be one for faculty professional learning communities in order to assist teaching development and encourage pedagogical changes that are often referred to as the outcome of a faculty learning community group, dependent on either its structure by design of content area or based upon a curricular goal or based upon a collective body of folks who are maybe regionally aligned or aligned by a cluster of colleges who are similarly located maybe like a workforce development area or a prosperity zone. If you think about all the possibilities for how community colleges and how PLCs, professional learning communities, or faculty learning communities can be organized, there's a lot of diversity in that way. And so to me, that really is an affirmation that we are doing work that is grounded in theory, it's grounded in best practices that continue the investment in our student outcomes. And so not just the K-12 student outcomes from a standardized testing and a completion perspective, but also our outcomes related to our community college students, our adult learners, our folks who are in CTE programs. The faculty learning community or professional learning community has the ability to, or has the abilities to really be a significant benefit to all of those possible structures. And so now that we kind of have that basic understanding, and I'll drop those 2 articles in the chat, the title, so that you can access them later, I want to kick it off to Kelly and Rebecca. And I want to ask you about your FLC, your faculty learning community, or your PLC, and you're welcome to share with the group which language you use. A successful FLC or PLC is built on strategic vision and well-organized plan for execution. Can you share with us this morning how you began planning for your community, including the steps that you took to make your vision become appropriate and appropriately developed? And you're welcome to jump in, whoever first.
Thank you, Monique, and welcome everyone. I want to start off by saying that most of our colleges in the East Hub are very small and located almost in the middle of nowhere. And so we kept hearing from those affiliate colleges how many of their areas might have one person. So there might be one accounting teacher and so on. So they felt very isolated, and they kept saying, is there a way for us to get to know other people in our field, or is there a way for us to get together and discuss topics? So that sort of planted the seed for us to think about the learning communities, so whichever way they go. So we started thinking about it. And then last summer, well, first of all, last spring, I attended the Dream Conference and attended an FLC session and realized how much I did not know and how much planning we needed to do to get this off the ground. So last summer, we held a FLC information session for our professional learning leaders on our affiliate colleges, just to give them an introduction to what it is and what we are thinking about. And then we started working with ATD to coordinate some training for Kelly and I. So we are in the beginning stages of developing ours. And we have been working with them, and they have been instrumental in guiding us on how to get this started. So we are actually going to have our first training session. That's where we're starting, teaching the people to facilitate FLCs. Instead of just jumping right in, we need to have people that can help facilitate these. So this facilitator training, the first one is this week. So we're very excited. I think we have 16 people from our affiliates that are attending. And so all of this build up and all of this guidance that we received from ATD of whether to go with a topic or whether to go with a discipline, what should we start with? And they were so good at asking us questions. What is your vision? how can we get this off the ground? And so we decided through their guidance to go with a topic first so that we could offer it to everyone that's interested. So we're starting with welcoming documents is our topic. And so we're going to train the facilitators, then have them take an ATD session on welcoming language in documents. And then they are going to help facilitate a PLC is what ours is really going to be, because we have faculty and we have staff that want to join. So they are going to help facilitate creating the FLC, because we also heard from faculty members that they want some workshops. So we hope we're going to kind of start off with the workshop, and then we hope these members, these facilitators, are going to take their knowledge back to their colleges and help create FLCs or PLCs within their own college.
Thank you for sharing that, Rebecca. I think that's an amazing example of how scaffolded this process can begin and how scaffolded the responses can be. Because like you said, you thought about thematically, is it topic? Is it another lens that we're starting with? And I think that it's really key to recognize you have the opportunity to create this learning community based upon the needs of this affiliate set of colleges. So for reference, in the East Hub, there are 16 colleges that fall under the East Teaching and Learning Hub. In the West, there are also 16. In the Piedmont region, there are 11, and in the Central, there are 15. And so the makeup of each of those teaching and learning hubs really can determine from the collective sense what a learning community can look like and what the strategies are in order to be responsive to what you've identified and what you've heard from folks are the needs, and then also provide an example for the professional learning leaders, your kind of peer counterparts at those 16 colleges, about how to loosely organize some of the possible learning communities in the spaces at their individual colleges. Natasha and Elizabeth, did you want to hop in and share a little bit about how you all began to plan your learning community and some of the strategies and things that you have learned in these early stages as well?
Sure, thanks. Good morning, everybody. It's good to be here with you all. So we're kind of in a different place than the East Hub right now. It just kind of turns out that when Wilkes and CVCC were named as the hosts for the West Hub, Wilkes was already in the process of creating local PLCs on their campus. And they're now in their third year of their local PLCs. CVCC, we are currently in year one of local PLCs, and we're using Wilkes as our model. So one thing I do want to say is that being a part of the hub played a vital role in this. CVCC would not have been modeling after Wilkes had we not made built the connections and community. So we're kind of seeing that a little bit on a small scale on our part. But I also want to say that we are actually also in the early stages of planning for the West Hub. And as we just heard from Kelly and Rebecca, of course, we want to have a strategic approach and vision as we move forward. So unlike what Rebecca was saying of course, we still have colleges that are spread out, but a lot of our institutions are bigger and we have larger departments. So where we're approaching it right now is we're working with our leaders across the 16 hubs to determine what is the best approach. And we've got two running themes. One is to create PLCs or FLCs that appeal to what we call our super users, our early adopters. So we've developed a pretty strong contingency of regular hub attendees, and those heavy users, they want more. They're highly motivated and they want the next level of professional learning. So that's one cohort that we are thinking about focusing on.
Another area that Elizabeth and I were discussing for the West Hub is looking at FLCs for discipline specific FLCs, where just like Rebecca was talking about, folks can come together for their discipline and talk about it. And we're trying to have presenters in the hub that share a variety of examples and things, but we just feel like that the discipline specific FLC will provide the opportunity for faculty to go deeper and really dig in to some of the teaching and learning resources and content and things that they can change in their classrooms while working together in this cohort, if you will, of an FLC. So we see a need for that discipline specific as well as the other one that Elizabeth just shared as well.
So what I'm hearing is that there's an opportunity in this work to consider timing as well as who your, as you call them, Elizabeth, super users are and have been, and the timing of maybe the launch of multiple learning communities. Do you begin with the folks who you've already grabbed and who are looking for extended community in maybe a more specific curricular or topical way? Or, as Rebecca and Kelly have pointed out, do you begin with a larger, more cohesive kind of umbrella where you're pulling faculty and staff educators and all of the folks to the table and giving them an opportunity to start in this area, and then maybe there's a learning community that comes out of that? It is very specific. And I think that's really important to recognize, because as you all can imagine, there is no one way to do all the things, right? There's so many areas for impact. There's so many opportunities to create community for the professional learning opportunities of faculty and staff. And there are so many ways in which that leads to the student success outcomes, from retention to completion of program, completion of courses that we are all looking to do, that it really does take a measured approach to be aware of who is your audience. What are some of the skills that you all have right now? How are you leaning on the folks that support you? How are you leaning on maybe the coaches, or how are you leaning on your institutional models? As I think about what you shared in the West Hub from Wilkes and CVCC, is there anything else that you can share about the pre-experience that got you to this point? From the coaching or facilitation that ATD did, if there's anything about recent conferences that you all have been able to attend that have sparked additional knowledge that maybe you want to share with folks about your ongoing professional learning and kind of awareness about this work.
Well, Natasha can speak more directly, but I will say that I'm pretty certain they utilized folks from Achieving the Dream in the creation of their local PLCs. So we've got a lot of history with Achieving the Dream and the kind of support that they are presenting us. And they've been really good, like Rebecca said, about just digging in, sitting down with us, not telling us how we should do it, but helping us talk through what it is our vision is and what we think we'd like to see happen, and then how we can get there. And of course, it won't surprise you that part of us are like, just tell us what to do, just give us the outline and the plan. But of course, we also know that these communities, we would want them to naturally crop up. But we know that teachers are stretched really thin. And so we are going to provide that foundational base. And so we're still not sure, because we're still in the early planning stages, we haven't determined yet which cohort to go with first, but it's very likely we're going to go along the same route as Kelly and Rebecca, in that we want to be as open as possible to get as many people involved, with the hopes that that could then lead to maybe a next level where you do have a discipline specific outcome, where people then take what they got from that first set of round of PLCs and then move forward into some of the discipline specific things, maybe a little shuffling, that kind of thing.
That's good. Natasha, go ahead.
I was just going to say, we did partner with ATD as we were thinking through what the PLCs at Wilkes would look like in the curriculum. We utilized the teaching and learning toolkit and some of our curricular that we shared in our PLCs and discussed and things like that. I also think, as Elizabeth mentioned, as we think through the West Hub and what the FLCs are going to look like, ATD has been very supportive, as she said, and instrumental in helping us think through all the details, because it takes all these little details to make it effective. Like she said, it should be spontaneous, but even in the spontaneity, we need to have, at least as FLC leaders, the facilitators prepared and putting all those pieces together so that it's cohesive and that faculty feel supported and they're able to take that that knowledge and that work back to their classrooms to help students with completion and retention and all the things that we're striving to improve across the state.
Thank you both. Rebecca, go ahead.
So to answer your question, Monique, about maybe future, what we're still learning about it. I just attended the conference at Virginia Tech on pedagogy, and one of the sessions I attended was professional learning communities, and it talked about forming one with faculty and students. And so I thought, wow, how wonderful that would be. And they had a lot of data on how that makes students feel much more included and more a part of the campus, and how it really improved their morale and their sense of wanting to participate more, and had some great results from that. So I thought, wow, once we get this moving, that would be something we would like to try to add in addition to a traditional FLC or PLC.
That's really good. And I think that just continues to underscore what we said earlier about, or what I said earlier about there not being one way to do this work, the learning community work, and the fact that you were able to hear about what another college or university is doing, and it gives you reason to think ahead about, well, what's next for us. I think is an amazing example of there are no limits to what's possible, and there are plenty of resources that are available. So what I did in the chat is I dropped ATD's Teaching and Learning Toolkit, and I recognize that not every college in the 58 is an ATD school. And so I think it's really important to recognize, though, that there are some really good resources accessible on their website or on the Belk Center website or on the Student Success Center website that can complement some of the work that's already existing, that so you don't have to be a member college in the network. And of course, this webinar, this opportunity together, provides additional resources for folks to consider. If you are interested in, or if you know of other professional learning opportunities or professional development opportunities that you have taken advantage of, please feel free to drop those in the chat. If there are conferences that you all would recommend as you're listening, that has had some sessions that have been impactful in your inquiry or in your development of this work, we welcome you to drop those in the chat so that we can share them amongst all the folks in tune to this call. The next question that I would ask you all is, the leadership of the learning community is really important. It's critical, especially when you're building a culture of teaching and learning on a campus, as well as in a teaching and learning hub, which is a collective of 16 or 11 to 16 different campuses. You're building faculty support, and you're also advocating for administrative buy-in. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the successes and some of the pain points, some of the things that you'd wish you'd known so far? And do you have any thoughts about best practices that you would like to share with the folks on this call that may just be beginning their development of a learning community, a faculty learning community, or a professional learning community? Natasha and Elizabeth, would you like to kick this one off for us?
Sure. So the hub mission, just to sort of reiterate, of course, is doing this teaching and learning with faculty, but another element is the capacity building, trying to do enough training of individuals that, like we've been saying, they can go back to their institutions, and we don't have to get the direct training from ATD for every single individual institution. We can kind of spread that wealth out. So one of the things that the West Hub did last summer was create what we called a summer institute for our professional learning leaders across the hubs. And we had a small group come, and we used that time to do some planning for this upcoming year. Speaking of pain points and things you wish you had known, well, July, it is too late to be planning for the fall. So as we head into year 2 and we're thinking about how can we utilize that time and bring our, professional learning leaders in, we're going to use our Summer Institute to really focus on how do you do that facilitator training? What does that look like? How do you create the topics? And our hope is to essentially create like a mini little toolkit so that each of our leaders who come to our Summer Institute can take that information back to their colleges, whether they use that to help support PLCs or FLCs within the hub, or whether they just do it locally within their own colleges. It's a win. So that's where we're heading this summer, is developing something so that we can help all of our leaders know how to train facilitators when they go back to their schools.
And I'll just jump in too, Elizabeth. I put in the chat at Wilkes, we specifically use a variety of resources, from ATD as well as the Student Success Center, and we built some in-house items as well. But something really important as we were building, and Elizabeth and I will do this with the West Hub too, as we're building, is to make sure we have a well-laid foundation and curriculum for our FLCs or PLCs, but also to remind your facilitators that there needs to be some room for flexibility and let the faculty bring some items to the table as well. So that was really important to us at Wilkes, that we had well laid out curriculum, but also if you had a faculty member come into the FLC or PLC and just said, hey, here's what I've got going on in my classroom and I need you guys to help me brainstorm. And so that organically happened time and time again in each PLC on our campus. And so that's something I hope to provide support in the West Hub as well, so that folks can come and help each other brainstorm, troubleshoot, share best practices that they're using in their classroom. So I think that flexibility is key. Another really integral piece that I think that's important that folks, if you're thinking about doing this at your own institution, to think about is also providing support not only to your faculty in the PLCs or FLCs, but also to your facilitators. And so that they have the proper support. And so at Wilkes, I was in a different role at the time, and I was the professional development leader. I met with our PLC coaches, is what we called them, every other week. And so we were meeting twice a month. How did it go? And just so that I could be there to support them. And we were there almost as a PLC or FLC ourselves, so that we're feeding into them so that they can feed into the faculty. And so making sure, keeping a check on them. How's it going? What do you need? And just being there and supporting them. And so from time to time, I would go to the PLC and support, however I needed. And so as we think through the West Hub PLCs and FLCs, I think that's really important, that our leaders, our facilitators have that support and that we're there for them as well as they're leading this work.
I really like the fact that you highlighted the flexibility and even the reflexivity that is required when someone is coming to a community and saying, hey, in real time, I need this. And it allows for this formative, in the moment, we had an agenda, but maybe we need to shift that a little bit to be responsive, and also to continue to model that this is not just a die cast that's cut. Like, it's not a plug and play. You do this, then you leave and you come back. And sometimes I think that's what is a fear of folks who are invited to be vulnerable and invited to say, join this community of other instructors, other practitioners who are saying this works really well, or maybe not so much, but I trust that this experience will give me the collegial space to think about something and also make some adjustments or come back, or just come back and say, hey, this worked right off the top. I love it. And I want to share it with others. For me, that's the real plus of this experience, is we're hearing from folks throughout this webinar series. They can share their successes and their pain points in real time, which gives folks an opportunity to really think through some things that they're in the process of building, or they're in the process of measuring. How do we know something is going to be successful? You're absolutely correct, Natasha. It gives space for authentic discussions and authentic connections to be made. even if they're not curriculum based, even if they're not by college, it sounds like across all 4 institutions in both hubs that you have folks that are maybe in your Rolodex. Is that like dating myself? But you could tag or who'll come back to you and say, hey, I just wanted to run this by you. And that community of sharing is really, really critical. How do you all know what success looks like for these learning communities? How will you measure what's working as you're moving throughout this process of beginning, building, and then going back to the facilitators that you're actually supporting along the way?
Well, Monique, in working with ATD to get our facilitator training series going, and like Elizabeth said, they are like start to finish so helpful from ground up to, we walked in the first meeting having no idea like what we were going to do or how this FLC was going to work. So they have been an excellent resource. But in our last meeting with them before our training series that starts Friday, we came up with sort of 3 outcomes or 3 scenarios of how it would look after the 4-day or 4 session facilitator training series that we would hope for scenario 1, scenario 2, or scenario 3. And if we can see any of those happen, I think we will consider ourselves successful. And those were to like either continue as like a FLC, PLC of just these facilitators together, who then work on a second topic other than the one that we're kind of focusing on right now. Or maybe they go back to their campus like we've been talking and implement PLCs and FLCs on their own campuses, or whatever kind of like you were talking, Natasha, whatever just evolves in this training series to see like where we want to move forward with these FLCs. But I think if any of those happen, if there's still a conversation about this after the series is over, if they want to continue to work together when the series is over, and if they go back to their campus and implement them, I think we can say we've done a good job.
That's awesome. I would agree. Folks wanting to come back. And then we just had one, but 2024 is not super far away, but thinking ahead to the next Student Success Conference in the fall of 2024, I think there will be something that could also be considered a measure of success for the collective work that's happening across the learning communities in the 2 hubs, as well as the learning communities that may come out of the Central and Piedmont hubs. If there are presentations that are around faculty or professional learning communities, and if they are connected to the synergy that's happening in this academic year and the prior one, I think that would also be a measure of success, particularly if those presentations are delivered by some of the folks who are participating in your facilitator training. You can't take all the credit, but again, that authentic discussion, that authentic community building is something that is the gift of being in a community college system, that there are 57 other folks who may have a similar experience that you can use for additional resources. Natasha, Elizabeth, would you add anything about what success will look like from your efforts on your ends?
Well, I'll just jump in and piggyback on what Rebecca was saying, but you know, if folks want to come back, and that's something at Wilkes that we saw, we had set dates or number of sessions that we would have for our PLCs or FLCs, and time and again, the facilitators would come to me and say, hey, they want to meet again, you know, or they were wanting to meet more than the minimum, which I think was a success. So I would say in the West Hub, if we see that happening, or folks going back and making real change and switching things up in their classroom and coming back and talking about it, which would be a success for us. I also think just in looking at the who is coming to our PLCs and FLCs. And so I really think a success for us would be to have a variety of participants, you know, our new faculty members who have just started, as well as our seasoned faculty members. And the collaboration of them working together, whether it's discipline specific or a super user, and just sharing some of that knowledge and best practices among individuals and faculty members in our hub would be a success. Elizabeth?
Yeah, agreed. I mean, I think the numbers are going to tell us a lot. How many people want to participate and how many people want to move forward with it, keep going. I think that'll tell us a lot. And it will be interesting to see if individual institutions also then kind of take that ball and run with it and see how they might apply it. And I mean, I'll even just say, through my hub experience, and with what CVCC is doing to model off of Wilkes, one of my roles, in addition to being a co-director, is being the chair of my rhetoric and composition department. And so I've actually implemented the idea into my department meetings this whole year. We use the first 30 minutes just as a, update informational kind of thing. And we use the last hour for discipline specific FLCs. And I've got somebody different in my department facilitates every month. And so even that is an idea that may not have come to me without this, foundation being there about, the creation of FLCs in a variety of ways.
It really is a testament to how thoughts and actions are scaffolded. We don't operate in kind of like a silo. There's oftentimes a connection to our other identities, right? So you're the co-director of a hub. You also teach courses. You also have some administrative responsibilities on your campus. You also have your own collective body of peers who are other co-directors and folks who you have gotten to know and leaned on beyond the other co-directors. And I think that really is a testament to how this effort and all of the efforts that are related to our colleges and the work that we do for educating students and helping them get to their most successful identities is really just a scaffolded effort. It's like that old Tetris game where there are these kind of steps and you figure, and there's opportunities to always get more points and things like that. You all shared and you kind of hinted towards the data and the impact. So I'm dropping in the chat, and I'm going to kudos you all because you are the first two hubs that were launched in the 21-22 academic year. I'm dropping in the chat the inaugural report from the Teaching and Learning Hubs, because in our next edition of the report, which will feature all four, East, West, Central, and Piedmont, I think we'll be able to talk about the impact of learning communities. So if you look at the numbers, the number of faculty who participated in the first year of the hubs being in just the eastern and western part of the states, and the impact that those faculty had based on the sheer number of courses that they taught and the sheer number of students enrolled, I would imagine that our next series of reports will also include a tease out that speaks to the type of programming, and that FLCs, PLCs will be a part of that. And as a soft plug, when folks are like, why do I give my data teller my colleague number? This is why. We ask that whenever folks are registering for a Teaching and Learning Hub event or professional learning series, so that we're able in a data agreement in collaboration with the system office, not personally identifiable, but we are able to support what is the impact. And the only way we can do that is through the registration process, so that we can collectively know what are the student outcomes that happened from a course level. So I want to move us to our next question, which might be our final question for our time together. I briefly shared a description of the learning communities. I dropped the 2 articles in the chat, and how the terms or the concept may become interchangeable with some institutions. Not good or bad or indifferent, just depending upon audience, depending upon design. The language may be FLC, it may be PLC, but at the core, learning communities and communities of practice are set out to foster shared practice and dialogue. And you've illustrated how folks have come back and had that kind of reflexive opportunity, and have also made in real-time requests to consider something that's pressing for their course. How do you plan or suggest to include educators from every seat to advance these best practices in teaching and learning? What follow-up do you all have, or do you anticipate as the learning communities continue to grow? Do you anticipate having in order to embolden and encourage folks from CTE, from curriculum, from the folks who are teaching our dual enrollment courses? How do you plan to create the space for everyone to continue doing this work and advancing their own teaching and learning practices. And you all can jump in, whoever wants to tackle this first and share with the group.
I'll just say, since we have just been doing this, reaching out to faculty and staff, we've heard that from all of our PLLs that staff is an important component of the college. So when we started thinking about this FLC training series, we debated back and forth on how best to find these individuals to participate. And we ended up going to the CAOs with an email and just saying, give us a nomination of who you think would best suit this particular type of thing that we're hosting in the fall. And I think the CAOs took very different approaches. I think some CAOs chose the person they wanted to participate. Other CAOs, I think, sent the email to the whole college. And so we got a bunch of different responses. Various colleges have several nominees. And then other ones may have been in a leadership meeting, I'm not sure. But the end result was that we now have a very diverse group of individuals who showed interest. We actually have an AVP of instructional services who wanted to participate, and then her department. So we have 3 people from that college, all the way over to an adjunct faculty member who I'm not sure if she's going to participate once we kind of discuss the time part, which is one of the issues with kind of working with part-time faculty, is in trying to be honest about this is the obligation you're putting in for no pay. And then we also have a staff person who's a trio, I think, director. So the email went across all the campuses. And so this first group of facilitators is going to be from each little end of it, well, most ends of the college, not, all of it, but I'm excited to see how they all work together. And the ATD was actually encouraging that we have this varied list of leadership down to, adjunct faculty, so that we hope it will work. So I'll be in touch.
That is awesome to hear. I love the fact that there is at least right now one adjunct faculty member who has indicated that they want to join this literal community of learners. I think that's amazing, because oftentimes it's hard, like you said, from a time commitment as well as from a return on their investment, how our college is able to support that work. And there's often a gap between what professional learning monies, if they exist, are extendable to full-time or adjunct faculty or not. And if there are no professional dollars that a college has identified that can support, how else do we encourage, invite, and acknowledge the fact that there is an investment when maybe someone is teaching across multiple institutions in a part-time role and is really bringing their industry knowledge as well as their passion for instruction to this space. What else would you all add about inclusion and outreach to specific audiences within the college, or amongst the folks who have indicated interest as of today in your learning communities that are upcoming? How else do you plan to engage folks?
Well, I'll just respond to the first part of the question about just sort of how we're coming up with it. I love the idea that Kelly and Rebecca approached the CAOs with their recommendations. And that was what CDCC did locally, was approached deans and directors and asked for their recommendations. And I was going to just throw in that one of the great things about collecting the data the way that we are, we can see who our super users are. We can see who our high interest folks are. And so part of our goal is to pull some of those people in our area. But that also leads to the question, like you said, how do we get to this next, this other group of people who maybe need us, but don't know that we're here. And that's not as easy a question to answer, especially when it comes to new faculty, because we know that, newer educators really need extra support, but they're also really overwhelmed in those first 1 or 2 years of teaching. And so we're still working on the best ways to reach out to those individuals, as well as, like Kelly said, how do we motivate adjunct faculty who are already probably stretched thin financially as well as with their time to do things for free? So those are big conversations that are always ongoing, and we're always constantly thinking about how can we help pull these folks in.
Yeah, that's an awesome perspective to have, and complements what our colleague Dr. Chantel Strickland Davis has dropped in the chat, which is another guide that's publicly available. If you're not in the network, you can still click the link and find it, from Achieving the Dream, that talks about professional learning communities starting, cultivating, encouraging, and then assessing. And there are some not toolkits, there's some guides, some guiding questions that are on the 4 sections that do the work that you all have been describing right now, and are great examples of the intentionality that is needed in deciding an FLC or a PLC is the next step for a college or a hub, as well as the intentionality in determining how do we hold each other accountable? How do we encourage participation from folks who maybe have not been outreached to or haven't been as responsive, whether it's by status, like full-time, part-time, or if there are certain curriculums because there are other professional development opportunities that are required for licensure, things like that. There's always this level of competing time for folks who are teaching, and you have highlighted, Elizabeth, some of the work that needs to be considered in continuing this work, and the steps, the analysis questions, and the worksheets and the toolkit that Dr. Strickland Davis takes that to another level, and is something that you all can take back to your individual institutions or your collective spaces if you're thinking about it from a departmental or college-centered work. I really appreciate you all being able to share your wisdom about what your learning communities are starting to shape up to look like, what your college's experiences have been to date, and what you're looking forward to in the future. Before I move on, I want to make sure that I give you all an opportunity to provide any final thoughts of wisdom, any final thoughts of consideration, or any comments around, hey, here's a pain point that you should anticipate as you're building a learning community. And it could be the email thing. How do you get folks to respond? It could be how do you find time logistically to pull everybody together? So before we move on to close out our webinar, I'd like to give Kelly, Rebecca, Natasha, and Elizabeth an opportunity to just provide any final words of wisdom to everyone that has joined us this morning.
I'll just go ahead, Natasha. It's fine.
Are you sure? Okay. I was just going to say one thing. Even at Wilkes, even though you know most of your colleagues and things like that, we provided spaces in the very beginning and really throughout each PLC/FLC to do some team building and to develop those relationships. And so that was a pain point for some groups and some communities that went a little quicker than others. And so I would just encourage anyone trying a PLC or FLC, and to remind ourselves and the hubs as well as we're launching this, to build some space for that. Because even though we all, if it's discipline specific, we all teach English, we still don't know each other. So I think just building time to get to know one another and doing some of that team building, cohesive collaboration, it's going to take your PLCs to a deeper level, or your FLCs, and building that connection. And what I saw at Wilkes was it really, when somebody wasn't there, where is so-and-so, concern, that team building, really building that community beyond the scope of the work. So that's important, but it's also important to build that community as well. So that, if you wanted one of your colleagues to come into your class and observe and say, watch me teach, give me pointers, that takes relationship and community. And so I would just remind everyone on the call here to really give space for that to happen, especially when it doesn't always happen organically.
And I'm going to jump in and follow up really quickly, because as I shared, CVCC modeled our PLCs after Wilkes. And for a variety of reasons, when we took the approach this past fall, we ended up ultimately having half as many face-to-face sessions as Wilkes. And I will tell you, it has been a pain point. It's such a fine line, right? We don't want to overburden faculty. We don't want to just add more to their plates. But if you don't meet with your PLC, you don't build community. And so we are struggling with exactly what the opposite of what Natasha's talking about. We may not have put in place enough meeting time, just plain old meeting times. It's like we wanted to make people feel like they weren't going to be too overburdened. Oh, we only have to meet 4 times this year. Well, twice in the fall, twice in the spring. We're learning it's not enough to develop the kind of relationships that have the kind of community that you want for that vulnerability to take place. So lesson learned. I mean, we're pushing forward because that's what we've got in place, but it's definitely something we're going to take forward into how we approach it next year, so that we can see, and I'm not in every PLC, but I know from my own experience that we're really struggling, still trying to make those initial connections in February.
And
That's
I
good.
wanted to add to what Kelly said about one of the things I think that will help is, since we are starting with a topic, we offered sessions last year on this topic. So we sent to the CAOs who the people were on their faculty that participated in those sessions. So that showed them there was already someone on their campus that had an interest in that topic. So that helped them know who they could probably reach out to. And hopefully that, since they already have an interest, they will want to take it further and to share it with their colleagues and be a part of this community.
That's good. Kelly, I don't want to leave you out if you wanted to add anything.
I was just going to say that for us, Rebecca and I, coming from schools that don't have FLCs initially, or even on our own campuses, that having a good leader to help us become informed on what one should look like, helping us plan it, is absolutely key. We thought we could do this last semester. We're like, oh, we got this FLC thing, let's get these on the schedule. And now we're having gone through just our informative sessions with ATD and getting ready to attend the facilitator training this coming Friday and then on, that I'm excited to kind of see what it looks like. And I think I'm glad we took a slower roll to it.
So I've heard 3 things, looking at my notes, that I think leave us in a good space. The first is give yourself grace. If you are the person that's planning, if you are the liaison for your college, if you are the brainchild, if you are the trusted person that gets the things because you're known to get things done, and this is a new additive to your portfolio of work, give yourself grace. The second I heard is identify what success looks like, and not just the metrics of the endpoint, but success along the way. And so hearing about some of the pain points, I think that's something that's successful because you're able to take that information in real time and make some adjustments moving forward. And then the third piece that I heard is use the resources that are already available to you, both the ones that are existing within college, the ones that are existing in the network of the 58, the ones that exist with our national partners. And if you are attending conferences, whether it's discipline specific or just national or regional conferences, and you see learning communities, faculty or professional learning communities on the agenda of events, make sure that's in your list of things that you go to if building, sustaining, and leveraging a community is something that you're interested in, because there are resources already available to each and every one of us based upon what we have access to. Have I missed anything that folks would offer as maybe 3 takeaways before we close out? Are there any questions from our folks who have joined us? You're welcome to unmute yourself, or as we've invited, to drop your question in the chat. We'll do it like a lot of going once, going twice, 3 times sold, no questions. That's not a problem. because you always have the opportunity to drop us an email after this webinar. You can send it directly to any of the folks on this call. You can send it directly to me. You can just respond to your registration link in your calendar invite, and we're happy to answer questions that you have in the future. As we are wrapping up, we have about 6 minutes left. I did want to just highlight what happens next. This is our second to last series in this webinar. The next webinar is on March 21st. It is from 1 to 2, and we're going to be talking about, as our culminating webinar, how we evaluate staff as educators. We'll be focusing on the collective work that has to happen both in instruction and academic affairs, student services, and from the leadership lens, from the president's office or space, chief of staff, vice president of operations, all of those titles. How do we make sure the intersection of all of our work is present? And how do we do that in a space that we are a catalyst for student success? How do we break down those silos? How do we continue to build community within institution and across the Great 58? And so we'll have some colleagues from Durham Tech, from Rowan Cabarrus and Central Piedmont Community College who will join us. I think I will drop the registration for that webinar, the link in the chat. You're welcome to join us on our final webinar for this series, again on March 21st. I do want to thank Kelly, Rebecca, Natasha, and Elizabeth for being vulnerable. Like we said earlier on, being in a space of community means that you have to give yourself the opportunity to share your experiences. And as all four have identified, that their learning communities are new-ish, and are being built on the success and the learning spaces from other examples. I want to thank them for sharing their opportunities, for reflection that they've had throughout this last 4 semesters, sharing the resources that they've identified that exist both in their hub network as well as in their affiliation with our ATD partners. And also just thank them for being so willing to do the thing that we often ask of each other, which is tell the story of what's happening in their work and what they're looking forward to, and what you all should be able to hear and see in the next report, or the future report. I shouldn't say the next, too much pressure, but a future teaching and learning report that the Belk Center will share about the impact that's happening based upon the East, West, Central, and Piedmont teaching and learning hubs. So thank you. I really appreciate you all for participating. Dr. Strickland Davis, have I missed anything?
No, this was excellent. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. And thank you, Monique, for an amazing job as well. We appreciate you.
Awesome sauce. Thank you so much, Dr. Strickland Davis. I appreciate you for being our behind the scenes partner at Central Piedmont Community College as well. I'm giving you all 3 minutes back in your morning. I hope that you have an amazing Tuesday and look forward to seeing you all again virtually or in person soon. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Have a great day.